7 dealerships quoted the female CEO $80,000. A single dad fixed her engine for $40. In parts, Renata Voss had heard the number so many times that week, it had stopped sounding real. $80,000. Every dealership said some version of the same sentence, delivered with the same practiced sympathy. Ma'am, at this point, it's cheaper to buy new. She was 41 years old, the CEO of Voss Analytics, a data infrastructure company she'd built from a garage apartment into a firm that now employed 600 people across 4 offices. She wore her success the way she wore her tailored charcoal suits, precisely, deliberately, without a single loose thread. People who negotiated against her lost, usually because she'd done more homework than anyone else in the room. And yet here she was, standing in her 7th dealership service bay in 2 weeks, being told for the 7th time that the car sitting behind her, her father's black 1969 Dodge Charger, was a lost cause. The engine seized, the service advisor said, not even looking up from his tablet. Timing chain's gone, probably warped a valve too. Realistically, you're looking at $75,000 to $80,000 for a proper rebuild with matching numbers parts. Or, he added, brightening slightly, the way people do when they smell an upsell, we've got a beautiful new Charger on the lot. Modern engine, full warranty, and honestly, ma'am, nobody's going to miss the headache. Renata didn't answer right away. She looked past him, out through the open bay door, to where the old Charger sat under a service light dust on the hood. One headlight slightly crooked, the paint still holding a shine underneath the grime if you looked at the right angle. Her father, Elias Voss, had bought it used in 1974 for $600 and had never let anyone touch it but himself. He'd died 8 months ago. The car had sat in her garage since untouched, because she hadn't been ready to decide what to do with it, and because some stubborn part of her believed it shouldn't need deciding at all. It should just run. No, she said finally. I'm not buying a new car. I need this one fixed. The advisor shrugged, already turning away. Your call, but I'd start saving. It was her office manager, Dana, who found the 7th option, or rather, the 8th, the one that actually mattered. Dana's brother-in-law had once taken a dead lawnmower engine to a place called Reyes and Coyle Auto, out past the industrial park, and come back talking about it for a month. They don't do estimates over the phone, Dana said, sliding a business card across Renata's desk. You have to bring it in. But everyone who's used them says the same thing. They don't touch anything until they've actually looked at it. Renata almost didn't go. She'd had the car towed to 6 shops already, and heard the same verdict every time, with only the dollar figure changing. But something about they don't touch anything until they've actually looked at. It stuck with her, mostly because none of the other 7 had bothered to do that either. Reyes and Coyle Auto was a squat cinder block building, with 2 bay doors, a gravel lot, and a hand-lettered sign that had clearly been repainted more than once. When the flatbed dropped the Charger off, a man came out wiping his hands on a shop rag, boots scuffed, a few days of beard on his jaw. His name patch, stitched crooked, read Coyle. Diego Coyle, he said. You the one with the 69 Charger. Renata Voss. She studied him mid-30s. Forearms marked with old scars that looked like burns from exhaust pipes. Eyes that went straight to the car instead of her. 7 shops have told me this. Engine is unsalvageable. I'm told you actually look before you talk numbers. That's the whole business model, Diego said, almost apologetic about it, like it should have been obvious. He walked toward the car slowly, the way a person approaches an animal they don't want to spook. Timing chain gone, they said, and a warped valve, possibly more. 80,000, give or take, for a full rebuild. Diego made a small sound in his throat, not quite a laugh. More like something between disbelief and recognition. He popped the hood without asking, propped it, and leaned in with a flashlight clipped to his collar. Marcus, he called over his shoulder. Come look at this before I say anything. I'll regret. A second man emerged from the far bay, younger. Maybe late 20s, wiping grease off his hands, with the same unhurried care Diego had shown. His name patch read Marcus Reyes. He glanced at the Charger and grinned like he'd just been handed a gift. Man, Marcus said, low and reverent. Somebody actually kept the original 440 inches this thing. What Renata didn't know yet was that Reyes and Coyle wasn't just a garage. It was two men who had built something out of a shared understanding that most repair shops had quietly abandoned, the difference between replacing and fixing. Marcus Reyes was a single father, raising an 8-year-old daughter, Talia. Mostly alone since her mother had moved out of state 2 years earlier for a job that never quite worked out the way it was supposed to. He picked Talia up from school himself most days, packed her lunches with little notes tucked inside, and had learned the trade from his own father, who'd run a 2-bay shop in the same neighborhood for 30 years before arthritis forced him to stop. Marcus had grown up underneath cars, the way other kids grew up on baseball fields. He didn't have a business degree. He had instead an instinct honed over 2 decades, the kind where he could hear a knock in an engine from across a parking lot and already know which of 4 things it probably was. Diego Coyle was his oldest friend, business partner, and the one who handled the parts sourcing, the invoices, and the increasingly rare skill of finding decades out of production components without gouging the customer for them. Diego had spent years working at a salvage yard before he and Marcus pooled what savings they had and opened Reyes and Coyle 5 years ago. Their unofficial motto, printed nowhere, but repeated constantly, was simple. Diagnose before you quote. Right now, hood up, flashlight moving methodically across the engine bay. Marcus was doing exactly that, and forming an opinion that had nothing to do with the number Renata had been quoted 7 times already. It's not seized, Marcus said, 20 minutes later, straightening up and wiping his hands. It's stuck. Big difference. This thing sat too long without running fuel, gummed up in the carb, and one of the belts perished and locked the pulley. Somebody heard it wouldn't turn over freely and assumed the worst, without ever pulling the plugs to check compression. They told me the timing chain was gone, Renata said. Chain's fine, Diego said, crouched by the front of the car now, tapping something with a wrench. I can hear it move when I bar the engine over by hand. If it were really gone, it wouldn't move at all. It'd just spin free and do nothing. That's a 5-minute check. Nobody did it. Renata felt something tighten in her chest, not anger exactly. More like the particular exhaustion of realizing she'd spent 2 weeks being told a fairy tale by people whose job was supposedly the truth. So what does it actually need? Marcus counted off on his fingers. New serpentine belt. Carb cleaning. I can do that in-house. No new parts needed there. A couple of vacuum lines that have dry rotted, and I want to replace the fuel filter while we're in there. Just to be safe. He looked up at her. Parts total. Maybe $40. Labor's a few hours, most of it just patience. $40, Renata repeated. Give or take, Diego said. We had most of it in stock already. Old cars like this. We keep basics on hand because we see them more than people think. Renata stood very still in the doorway of the bay, looking at the two of them, one crouched by the front wheel, one still half inside the engine bay, and felt an emotion she hadn't expected to feel over an $80,000 quote turning into a $40 one. She wanted to cry, and didn't entirely understand why, until she said it out loud. My father restored this engine himself in the 80s, she said quietly. He used to say a good engine doesn't die, it just gets ignored. Marcus looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly, the way people do when a stranger's private grief suddenly makes sense of everything they're looking at. Well, ma'am, he said, your father built it right. It just needed somebody to actually listen to it instead of guessing. They had it running within 3 hours. When the engine finally turned over a low, rolling growl that filled the whole bay, Renata put a hand over her mouth and didn't move for almost a full minute. Diego and Marcus gave her the space without a word. The way people do when they recognize what they're actually witnessing isn't a repair. When she finally asked for the invoice, it read, parts $38, 72, labor $180, total, under $220, for a car that 7 other shops had priced like a house down payment. She tried to pay them triple. Both men refused. We charge what the job's worth, Marcus said. Not what we think you can afford. That's not how the rest of the industry seems to work, Renata said. No, Diego agreed. It's really not. She didn't leave it there. 2 weeks later, Marcus got a call from a number he didn't recognize mid-shift, hands too greasy to answer at first. When he finally picked up, it was Renata, and she wasn't calling about the charger. Voss Analytics, she explained, had a small fleet of company vehicles, nothing huge. 30-some vans and cars used for regional deliveries and site visits, serviced for years through a contract with a large regional auto group. She'd never once questioned the invoices. After the charger, she'd finally pulled the last 2 years of maintenance records and found a pattern that made her stomach turn. Parts marked up, 3 and 4 times retail. Diagnostic fees, charged on cars that had never actually been diagnosed, entire component replacements, billed on vehicles that, it turned out, hadn't needed them at all. "I want to bring you and Diego in," she said. "Not to fix cars for my company, to audit the people who've been fixing them." Marcus laughed, assuming it was a joke, the way he had at the salvage yard for years, whenever anyone suggested his opinion mattered outside a garage. "I'm serious," Renata said. "I've spent my whole career hiring people who know what they're actually looking at, instead of what they can convince someone else they're looking at. That's exactly what the two of you did with my father's car. I want that for my whole fleet." It took Marcus and Diego 11 days to agree. Mostly because neither of them believed a corner garage had anything to offer a company with 600 employees. But the audit, once they finally said yes, took less than 6 weeks, and it uncovered just over $300,000 in inflated and phantom charges, across 2 years, all from a vendor everyone at Voss Analytics had trusted simply because no one had ever known enough to check. Renata didn't offer them an office job. She knew better than that by now. Instead, Voss Analytics became a retainer client of Reyes and Coyle Auto. And the shop's gravel lot got a second building 6 months later, paid for in part by a contract that let 2 men who'd spent their careers being underestimated finally stop worrying about rent. Marcus kept driving Talia to school every morning. Some Saturdays now, she sat on an overturned crate in the shop doing homework, while her father worked, occasionally asking questions about engines that Marcus answered, like each one was the most important thing anyone had ever asked him. The charger still runs. Renata drives it out to Reyes and Coyle every few weeks now. Not because anything's wrong, but because she's learned, slowly, that the sound of an engine running right is worth checking on even when nobody's telling you to. The 7 dealerships that quoted her $80,000 never learned what happened to the car. They didn't need to. Renata had learned something from her father's engine that no MBA had ever taught her. Sometimes the thing everyone calls broken beyond repair is just something nobody bothered to actually listen to. The end.